Thank you, all of you, for joining us this afternoon. Let's begin with Mr. Jadhav. Let's begin with you. Gandhi and Ambedkar, today intrinsic, indispensable part of India's political thought. To have Gandhi and Ambedkar by your side gives you moral currency in the eyes of people. And understandably, both the right, the left, the centrists want a piece of Gandhi and Ambedkar. But as we invoke him, as we try and appropriate him, do we truly emulate him is the question. And what is the true path to seek and the true address to the legacy of Mr. Ambedkar and Gandhi?
Thank you. Thank you for letting me join this distinguished panel. As far as appropriating Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Ambedkar is concerned, one has to take a look at two aspects of that. Appropriation of a persona or appropriation of invocation in terms of invocation.
The mic a little closer. Can you all hear him at the back? Can you hear him at the back? Raise your hands if you can hear him. Okay, great. Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Just a little closer.
When we are looking at appropriation of Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Ambedkar, we have to look at it from two different dimensions. One is appropriation in terms of persona, and the second one is in terms of invocation of ideas. As far as appropriation in terms of persona is concerned, in respect of Mahatma Gandhi, what has happened is, for majority of Indian population, Gandhiji remains highly venerated as the father of the nation. That veneration has neither gone up or gone down. It has remained, it has not been waxed or waned over a period of time. However, there are two sections of society, at least two sections. One section which calls him father of appeasement. They have been very vocal talking against him. That has to some extent appropriation gone in the opposite direction of appropriation. Second is a set of society, a section of society, staunch Ambedkarites who dislike him for Pune Pact that took place between Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Ambedkar, for which they think that they have been a political loser. But on the whole, for majority, veneration has remained more or less same. On the other hand, as far as Dr. Ambedkar is concerned, there is a complete transformation. There is a complete change in terms of appropriating Dr. Ambedkar's persona. The change has been simply phenomenal because people have now realized that Dr. Ambedkar's scholarship covers the entire spectrum of human rights. And therefore, what has happened over a period of time is that Dalits, every constituency has a large chunk of Dalits as well as OBCs, and politicians who are very conscious of that, they are inclined to, which is very obvious when such large chunk of people have their allegiance or sympathy for Dr. Ambedkar. For any political party which does not own Dr. Ambedkar today or does not list him among the top icons of the party, they are certainly going to lose Dalit votes and large part of OBC votes. So therefore, getting into that vote bank, there is a phenomenal change in terms of appropriation of Dr. Ambedkar as a phenomenon. As far as the second aspect is concerned, that is the invocation of ideas, let's talk about Mahatma Gandhiji first and then about Dr. Ambedkar.
Okay.
As far as Mahatma Gandhi is concerned, I would surmise, my feeling is that mostly there has been a lip service and there has been a part invocation of ideas. If you, for example, take the seven social sins that were given by Mahatma Gandhi: wealth without work, commerce without morality, politics without principle. All these have not been imbibed. All these have not been invoked. While Mahatma Gandhi remains as a moralist idol for the country as a whole, I think in terms of ideas, mostly there has been a lip service, exception is the Panchayat Raj institutions which have been created in the last 75 years. That is clearly vindication or invocation of Mahatma Gandhi's ideas. As far as Dr. Ambedkar is concerned, as I was saying, people are realizing that Dr. Ambedkar's great scholarship, Dr. Ambedkar was an intellectual colossus, and his contribution spans the entire spectrum of human rights. And with the spread of education and with the emergence of a strong Dalit middle class, and with the government of Maharashtra and the government of India together publishing the works of Dr. Ambedkar, he has written 22 volumes, and each volume has several part volumes. So his huge contribution, that is recognized, and since his scholarship spans a very wide range of human rights perspective, more and more Dalits, remember that Dr. Ambedkar in his time could not get all Dalit castes together, but after his death, what has happened is that with the spread of education and so on, now all Dalit caste and in fact entire deprived community, deprived classes, deprived and underprivileged classes, they look at Dr. Ambedkar as a messiah, and that has led to more and more invocation of his ideas.
So invocation, yes, but you know, as we invoke him, are we embracing both of them? You know, invocation, appropriation at one end is different than actually embracing and emulating. Tushar Gandhi, I'd like to bring you in on this conversation. You know, we talk about these two icons, these two stalwarts, whose own interpersonal relationship were as complex as what their legacy is. How do you view it in the current context where, you know, they're suddenly back into the center stage on a national political level as well, be it the left, right, centrist, everybody wants to invoke them. Have we been able to emulate them truly?
Before I start into your question and answer your question, I will be guilty of paying lip service to both these great icons of Indian democracy if I don't begin with registering my strong condemnation of the draconian persecution of Indian independent media that has been launched by the government of India in the last couple of days, reprehensibly the day after Gandhi Jayanti. That itself shows how much we understand Bapu, because I think if they stand for anything, the two stand for liberty, freedom, and for the rule of law. And unfortunately, day by day, we are seeing the erosion of these values. So that is where the country stands. I think the problem is with, as far as Bapu goes, it's with people like me who have made it our life's mission to be identified as Gandhians. And we have done the greatest damage to him because we have allowed his deification to happen instead of allowing his ideology to be his legacy. And when that happens, I think the legacy and the ideals die out, because it's so easy to pretend to worship. You know, go abroad, go and get your photographs with all the statues and things, and then come back and sit with people who fire bullets at Bapu's image or abuse him, parliamentarians who abuse him. That is where the whole issue is with Baba Saheb. I'm sorry to say that, but just like Bapu, also with Baba Saheb, the hurdle to understanding that great person has been created by the politicization of his legacy into, you know, it's so sad that such a titan is today viewed as a Dalit leader. He is the leader of this nation, he is the leader of this republic, he is the icon of our constitution, but you go and talk about him and he becomes a Dalit leader. And these are the things that we need to be aware of, how hypocritic we are in our worship, also how insincere we are in our worship, and how we reduce ideals into rituals and then corrupt them as much as we want. So I think that is what we need to talk about and need to introspect. You know, while we are sitting over here, while we are intellectualizing the whole ideology, the forces of oppression are acting out there in society, playing out their agenda, enforcing their will. If we have to counter them, we, like Baba Saheb and Bapu, need to be out on the streets. And that is where the real homage to people like him would happen. Otherwise, it's mere rituals in a fancy manner or in a crude manner. And that's what we have done. That's why Bapu has been turned into a Mahatma, where Mahatma is nice to worship. Let's not study him. There are 100 volumes of his collected works gathering dust in every library where they are. And unfortunately, apart from the few, the same thing is going to happen with the collected works of Baba Saheb. The source of inspiration, the source of understanding, the source of learning, is being allowed to rot away on bookshelves. What kind of worship are we talking about? So I think lip service is the right thing, and that too insincere lip service is the way we should be describing what we have done to the legacy of both these great people.
You know, Manoj, Mitta, I'll come to you, sir. Manoj, Mitta, you know, there's a certain contradiction to it, and Tushar Gandhi has made a point, so I'm going to come right back to that question. Because, you know, symbolism, totems, appropriation, all of that aside, but let's keep it in and take a look in the current context. He started the conversation about, you know, certain journalists who've been raided. But where we look at it in terms of these journalists, in terms of certain activists, those who seemingly follow the Gandhian or the Ambedkarite philosophy or ideology, today some of them are facing sedition charges, some of them are being called anti-nationals. Do you read this dichotomy, the contradiction in the trends, and how do you analyze that? Because on the surface, we eulogizing them, but in terms of you know, certain positions that we take, political and otherwise, we are in contradiction to them.
Very well put. Sorry. Thanks, Preeti. That was very well put, and I'm happy to be following after Mr. Gandhi, because of his gesture of expressing solidarity with the journalists who were raided the other day. Being a journalist, I can't but express gratitude to him for that. And the specific point you made about
Contradiction.
sedition. Yeah. Sedition represents one major issue of appropriation, because you may recall that Gandhi was himself a victim of this provision of sedition. He was himself tried and jailed on that charge. And one would think that after India attained independence, and Gandhi was not the only one, even Tilak and others were put behind bars on this charge. Right? It was a provision that was weaponized by the colonial administration. And one would think that once India was decolonized, this would be something that the Nehru administration or the subsequent administrations would do away with. Right? And that's not what happened at all. So that itself shows how there is tokenism, there is insincere lip service, as he put it. And I would like to go a little, both Mr. Jadhav and Mr. Gandhi, gave the general context very well. I would like to go into the specifics of how each of the two major ruling parties that we have had, Congress and BJP, have appropriated these two historic figures in their own different ways because of their ideological...
They have their own approaches.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let me just dwell briefly on that. You know, Gandhi was somebody who, especially towards the end of his life, he was all about Hindu-Muslim unity. And that was the cause for which he laid down his life. Right? And that set the tone for the new republic, and it did help the Nehru administration and the Indira Gandhi government to an extent of keeping the communal temperature under control, right? But then we saw something like 1984 happening, where a pogrom was orchestrated in Delhi, and we saw how that led to the Congress party of the time under Rajiv Gandhi reaping an electoral harvest, right? And that set a template for the other side. BJP, in fact, Maharashtra is the first state where post 92-93 violence, it was the combine of Shiv Sena and BJP that came to power because of their alleged role in the violence and so on. And then we saw something similar happening, post 2002 as well. The BJP under Narendra Modi coming to power with a thumping majority under the shadow of that violence, right? So we have seen that kind of travesty of Hindu-Muslim unity, or this communal harmony that Gandhi lived for and died for, and that was being violated in this manner in different ways by the two parties. Now, as far as Ambedkar is concerned, it is true that to Congress goes the credit of making him the first law minister of India. To Congress goes the credit of making him the chairman of the drafting committee and so on and so forth. But then once they fell out over the issue of Hindu Code Bill, he was completely marginalized, sidelined, so much so that it was many years after his death, when there was a non-Congress government at the center under VP Singh, they were the ones who gave him his due. They were the ones who made him, Bharat Ratna, and then his works, his writings, gained popularity since then, and that engagement with ideas only began then, and that's why his persona, his influence grew astronomically since then, right? But then the current dispensation, for instance, BJP, now they very selectively deal with certain aspects of him, which is his views on Islam as expressed in Thoughts on Pakistan, one of his many books. Or, how when he finally chose to give up Hinduism, he ultimately chose another, what they call Indic religion, that is Buddhism. And they express great appreciation for that. But what they overlook, and very conveniently so, is that the bulk of Ambedkar's writings were a very scathing critique of Hinduism, of Hindu customs, of even Hindu scriptures. His most famous tract, that is Annihilation of Caste, goes on to say that there are certain scriptures we need to excise, certain portions which valorize
or
caste
his
discrimination.
understanding of nationalism, very, very different for what it is in the
let
current
me tell you
context.
that also. Like, for instance, what he said about Kashmir. What, BJP has made a religion out of, as somebody said before me, you put him on a pedestal, you don't engage with his ideas because they are so inconvenient to you. So you create what Modi government very famously did was they created Panch Tirth. They made sites associated with him as some kind of a pilgrimage, right? Circuit, Ambedkar circuit it is called. 5 different places you can go to, right? But what they don't engage with is on this very hot button issue of Kashmir.
Right.
What exactly did Ambedkar say? He very clearly said that his prescription was, let us divide Jammu and Kashmir into 3 zones, Jammu and Ladakh, the Buddhist area and the Hindu area, and keep that to ourselves. And as far as the valley is concerned, which is predominantly Muslim, let us have a plebiscite.
Right.
And whatever is the outcome of that plebiscite, let us go by that. And that is what he said then. Now,
Right.
one is not in the least suggesting that that's the solution we should adopt today. But these were the positions that these great men at different points of time took. So when you talk about Gandhi or Ambedkar, you have to look at them in totality. There were
Right.
certain values which are inconvenient to these respective parties and they ignored.
And it cuts
Yeah.
both ways. You're
And
right there.
That's
And
how they are guilty of the charge of appropriation, which means that you selectively pick up what is politically
but it's
convenient
also
to you.
said, it's also
Yeah.
said, Mr. Mitta, to neutralize an ideology, it's best to appropriate it. But I'm going to, I'll bring in Mr. Kamble into this conversation. Let him, just want to bring him in. Mr. Kamble, Ambedkar was a realist. He was an icon class. We've hero worshipped him, put him up on a pedestal, something possibly he wouldn't have ever wanted. For you, how do you reckon would be his true legacy? How do you view his true legacy?
मैं हिंदी में बात
आप
करता
हिंदी में
हूँ
बात
ओके
करिएगा जी कामले
तो डॉक्टर बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर जी को अगर हम पढ़ेंगे तो उन्होंने उनका जो काम है बहुत ही वेरियस फील्ड में उन्होंने काम किया है ही वॉज अ लॉ मेकर ही वॉज अ सक्सेसफुल लॉयर इकोनॉमिस्ट और बहुत सारी चीजें हैं तो पर्टिकुलरली ही वॉज द बेसिकली स्टूडेंट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर लंदन से पढ़ के आए अमेरिका से वो पढ़ के आए सभी जो डिग्रियां थी बाबा साहब की वो इकोनॉमिक्स में थी व्हेन ही केम बैक ही बिकम अ प्रोफेसर ऑफ सोशियोलॉजी एंड इकोनॉमिक्स इन सिडनेहम कॉलेज तो बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर का जो इकोनॉमिक्स का जो काम है वह सबसे बड़ा है फॉर मी मेरे लिए और जो हमारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है दलित इंडियन चेंबर ऑफ कॉमर्स एंड इंडस्ट्री जो कोर फिलॉसफी जो है जो इकोनॉमिक थॉट्स ऑफ डॉक्टर बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर एंड इकोनॉमिक इंपावरमेंट ऑफ अ शेड्यूल कास्ट एंड शेड्यूल ट्राइब इसके लिए अगर हम देखेंगे तो बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर जी की जो लीगेसी है तो देर आर 5 लीगेसीज जो है वो एक सबसे बड़ी तो वो एजुकेशन लीगेसी है जिसमें वो खुद एक बहुत ही अच्छा उन्होंने एजुकेशन किया एक स्कॉलरशिप पे जाके 2 डिग्री उन्होंने हासिल की ओके तो एजुकेशन फिर उसके बाद में उन्होंने एक्चुअल इन प्रैक्टिकल पीपल्स एजुकेशन सोसाइटी उन्होंने इस्टेब्लिश की सो दिस इज एजुकेशन लीगेसी वेयर वी फॉलो देन देर इज अ रिलीजियस लीगेसी फॉर देम ही कन्वर्टेड ही एम्ब्रेस्ड एज अ बुद्धिस्ट तो उन्होंने बुद्धिस्ट सोसाइटी ऑफ इंडिया इस नाम से एक इंस्टीट्यूट बनाई दैट इज अ रिलीजियस लीगेसी जिसको हम कह सकते हैं फॉर इज सोशल डिफेंस उसके लिए उन्होंने समता सैनिक दल यह बनाई तो उस सोशल लीगेसी उसको हम कह सकते हैं और थर्ड इज अ पॉलिटिकल पार्टी आरपीआई रिपब्लिकन पार्टी और इसमें जो 5th लीगेसी जो है जो हम लोग फॉलो करते हैं एज अ डिक्की दैट इज अ इकोनॉमिक लीगेसी जो है और उनका जो काम है इस फील्ड में डॉक्टर जाधव जी तो उन्होंने लिखा भी है बुक्स भी लिखे हैं उन्होंने तो बाबा साहब का जो काम है फॉर दी देश के डेवलपमेंट के लिए व्हेन ही वाज अ लॉ मिनिस्टर लेबर मिनिस्टर पीडब्ल्यूडी और बहुत सारे इरिगेशन का जो काम उन्होंने किया है ये सब हम सब लोग जो जानते हैं तो एज अ इकोनॉमिस्ट he was a very successful professional lawyer he used to trading shares in Bombay Stock Exchange बॉम्बे के बहुत सारे कॉर्पोरेट ऑफिसेस के ही वॉज अ वेरी सक्सेसफुल कॉर्पोरेट लॉयर तो एक एज अ प्रोफेशनल जो है उनको हम आइकॉन मानते हैं और उनके जो आर्थिक विचार है जो अनुसूचित जाति जनजाति के जो युवा है उनमें वो कैसे ट्रांसफॉर्म हो और एक इकोनॉमिक एम्पावरमेंट सोसाइटी में कैसा हो इसके लिए वी वर्क विद एज अ चेंबर उसके लिए हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं
I'm going to just, I'm going to, a quick advice. We're running short of time, so let's try and keep our interjections a little short so we all get a word edgeways. But Mr. Jadhav, I'll come back to you on what we were also talking about earlier, which is you appropriate an ideology sometimes to neutralize it. Is it even possible that you have Gandhi and Ambedkar on the lips and Godse and Savarkar in your heart? Is this dichotomy real?
No. That's a very sensitive political question. I don't think I would like to answer that. But if you allow me, I would like to very briefly comment on some of the very interesting observations which were made by my co-panelists. First of all, why was Dr. Ambedkar not recognized as a national leader to begin with? There is a reason. In all the textbook, he has always been portrayed as a leader of untouchables, and very reluctantly sometimes in some sources as an architect of the Indian constitution. That I say reluctantly because even that title was not given to him by Indian leaders. It was given to him by a foreigner who was the author of Pandit Nehru's biography. So we have been always marginalizing Dr. Ambedkar, and that has changed. So what has kept his legacy alive? His legacy has been kept alive over a period of time by simple people who sing songs, and if you look at the annual gatherings which take place on 6th December in Chaitya Bhumi in Mumbai, 20 lakh people come. And on 14th October in Nagpur, something of the similar order people come. And these are the people who worship him, who really have propagated his thoughts, ideas, and continued his legacy. And now, with more and more knowledge available about the scholarship and broad sweep that Dr. Ambedkar had, his idea of nationalism was not only snatching the power from the British. His idea was to construct a democratic republic. And this is something which is catching on, and that is why more and more people are joining that bandwagon. And
But Mr.
people
Jadhav,
are
he also
every
said
now
the
and then they're
fetish to
discovering.
nationalism,
Sorry?
the fetish of nationalism can be destructive.
Not-
The fetish of nationalism can be destructive. It's something that was said by him.
No. We're talking about the idea that the Congress leaders always had of taking the power from the British rule. As opposed to that, Dr. Ambedkar's idea was to awaken the social conscience of Indian people and to create a society, create a society which is based on democratic republicanism. That was the idea.
Right.
One more point that I want to make is that Tushar ji said that the volumes written on Dr. Ambedkar would remain like volumes on Gandhi ji would remain in the library. I seriously disagree with that because I know for sure how these ideas are propagating. Now in n number of universities in India, there are centers to study Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's ideas, and more people are taking PhDs and doing higher studies on that. So that is unlikely to happen. One final point, what my friend Milind said about Dr. Ambedkar as an economist, I want to add that he was not only an economist in terms of being the most highly erudite economist of our country ever, but he was also a great economic administrator. And the point that he made, my friend Manoj bhai made about the annihilation of caste, Dr. Ambedkar was, in annihilation of caste, he said that we need to put explosives to the religious text. Why? Because they authenticate the caste system in our country. And that is why
I'm going to just quickly bring in, because we're running a bit short of time, so can I, with your permission, I just want to bring in Mr. Gandhi back into this conversation. Mr. Gandhi, the question that was a little sensitive for Mr. Jadhav, would you want to take that question? Is it a dichotomy to espouse values of Gandhi and Ambedkar, but on the lips, but where the heart comes, it's Savarkar and Godse?
Do I need to even answer that question? Because it's the reality that stares us in the face. You see it so transparently being practiced in the political circles who vie with each other to appropriate the legacies, but even while bowing their heads in Rajghat, though Nathuram is being worshipped, why do you think that Nathuram trends on 2nd October as the patriot of India and things? It is an orchestrated strategy that is being implemented, and this is a result of us having reduced all our icons to mere rituals and not actually adopting their ideology and putting it into practice. I can understand politicians. See, political parties work for electoral gains. And so wherever they see electoral gains, they adopt those policies. And so for everything, their attention or their adoption becomes fleeting. And so I can understand that. But what about
Right.
the people who don't get tired referring to Baba Saheb as the father of the Constitution, and a few who now still refer to Bapu as the father of the nation? What are we doing for both those legacies when we see that the greatest legacy of the two, the idea of India, is being so effectively corrupted and obliterated? Are we doing anything to save that legacy? If not, then isn't this a whole era of mere lip service for everything, for every issue? It's just
Right.
a superfluous, glossy thing. You look at the end of G20, the ceremony at Rajghat.
Right.
It was so glitzy and so devoid of emotions and honesty.
Right.
But everybody was impressed by the orchestrated drill. You know, beating the retreat is not that rehearsed at Rashtrapati Bhavan by
But
the
there were
military.
solid takeaways from
as
there.
it
In
was
terms
over
of
there.
diplomatic takeaways, there were solid takeaways from there. But that's a matter of different debate.
No,
Mr.
I'm not
Gandhi.
talking about
Yeah, that's a
diplomatic
matter of different
takeaways.
debate,
I'm
but-
talking about the
Right.
ritualization of the legacy at Rajghat. It was the
Right.
most current example of how trivialized it has been made.
You know, I want to bring in Mr. Mitta, one final comment because we run out of time. In terms of what their thoughts were on religion, nationalism, inclusiveness, would Ambedkar and Gandhi today be seditious and anti-nationals? Or judged by a certain lot in that?
Absolutely. They would be in TR.
It's questions for you, Mr.
Yeah,
Mitta. No, sir. No problem. Go.
Yeah, I mean, this is your question is answered by the fact that the preamble to the Constitution that we all swear by, the word, the thought relating to fraternity, you know, in giving due place to the dignity of the individual, and about fraternizing, of being inclusive, is something that was introduced by Ambedkar in the preamble. He had a major role in that, and he believed that without fraternity there would be no liberty and equality. I mean, there would be no meaning to that, right? And many of those thoughts are today being undermined with impunity, as evident from the fact that what was considered communalism around the time of independence because of Gandhian influence today passes off for nationalism, Hindu nationalism. You know, the way you otherize the other community, the way you get away with this kind of hate rhetoric, this exclusive politics. So all this is evidence of appropriation. Appropriation is all about insincerity, right? So when you pay lip service to Gandhi and Ambedkar on the one side, what you very aptly said, you have Gandhi on your lips, but Godse in your heart. I mean, this dichotomy is most evident in the way, politics is playing out today. The hate has been valorized and has mainstreamed, has been normalized, and hate rhetoric leads to hate violence too.
Mr. Jadhav doesn't agree. I've run out of time, but Mr. Jadhav, you have 10 seconds to interject, and then we are going to close the session.
I want 30 seconds to make a point. If you
30
allow.
seconds, sir. Yes, 30 seconds.
Okay. What I would like to add finally is that there are very few unifying factors in India today, in today's social and diverse cultural fabric. There is a communal divide on the basis of caste and religion. There is the ideological divide, tradition versus modern. There is the class divide, left and right. With all these divisive influences, leaves Indian Constitution as the only rallying point for all the diverse tendencies
Right.
which are forced to come together. And who is associated with the rallying point of Constitution is Dr. Ambedkar, and that is why Dr. Ambedkar is the rallying point for all the political parties today.
Well, and
Thank
also,
you.
and also,
And I add that
And also Mahatma
Ambedkar,
Gandhi,
Ambedkar was in the Constituent Assembly playing that important role because of Gandhi's intervention.
Exactly,
He was
right.
responsible for
With
entrusting
that.
that responsibility to Ambedkar.
And it cuts both ways because we've seen appropriation from the right, left and center. But in appropriating, have we truly embraced Gandhi and Ambedkar? We leave it for, ladies and gentlemen, for all of you to decide. We're going to leave you with that thought. Thank you, all four of you, for
Thank-
joining us. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.